Goodfellas. The film, released in 1990 under the direction of Martin Scorsese, completely changed the way Hollywood told stories about the mafia world. But the secrets behind the scenes are what truly send chills down the spine. Throughout the filming process, real gangsters, men who had killed, who had laundered money, showed up right on the set. They quietly observed, offered suggestions, even sat in the theater during screenings, just a few rows away from the actors playing their own roles. Martin Scorsese once admitted that there were days when he didn't know if he was directing a movie or recording a real slice of life from the underworld. And what makes this story even more thrilling is how the film came to be. At first, Scorsese refused to read Nicholas Pileggi's book, Wise Guy, the book that recounts the life of gangster Henry Hill. He was tired of crime films and decided not to touch them anymore. But when his career was on the brink, he picked up the book, and after just a few pages, he knew this was the story he had to tell. From there, a chain of risky events began. The studios objected because it was too violent, too morally ambiguous. The studio lawyers feared lawsuits, since many real-life characters were still alive, even under witness protection programs. But Scorsese remained firm. That ambiguity is the truth. This isn't a story about heroes or villains. This is a story about people when they choose the path of crime. When Goodfellas officially entered the casting phase, the studio wanted big names, Tom Cruise, Alec Baldwin, to guarantee box office revenue. But Martin Scorsese said no. He had seen in Ray Liotta something few others noticed, a blend of charm and the darkness hidden deep in his eyes. And Scorsese believed that only Liotta could become Henry Hill. Ray Liotta recalls that he pursued Scorsese multiple times. From restaurants to film festivals, he even nearly got arrested by police for trying to approach the director. He said, "I knew I was Henry. I knew it down to my bones." And in the end, that persistence paid off. Robert De Niro, who played Jimmy Conway, prepared in a completely different, extreme way. He found a way to contact Jimmy Burke, the real-life inspiration for the character, while Burke was still in prison. One call was blocked for violating federal law, but De Niro didn't care. He wanted to know every little detail, how to count money, how to hold a cigarette, even how to stack dollar bills in order. Joe Pesci, in the role of Tommy DeVito, drew from his childhood memories in a neighborhood that lived next to the mafia. He brought a real story from his own life into the iconic "funny how" scene. Once, he accidentally complimented a gangster as funny and nearly lost his life for it. That real-life story turned into a film scene that made the whole world shiver. Lorraine Bracco, in the role of Karen Hill, was determined not to play the character as a passive victim. She wanted Karen to be a woman who willingly stepped into the whirlwind of power. That's why the scene where Karen holds a gun to Henry's face isn't just a cinematic shock. It's proof of the active complicity of those who live on the edge of the criminal world. Paul Sorvino, in the role of Paulie Cicero, initially felt stuck, unable to find the character. Then one day, when he looked in the mirror and held his face still, his eyes lifeless, he knew he had found Paulie. From then on, with just a few small gestures, a few whispered words, Sorvino created a boss who was both silent and terrifying to everyone. That cast, from De Niro, Pesci, Liotta to Bracco and Sorvino, didn't just act. They transformed. They lived like real criminals. And this blurred the line between performance and reality, dangerously, to the point that sometimes even they couldn't tell where the role ended and they began. The atmosphere on the Goodfellas set was never like that of an ordinary film, more like an underground casino where anything could happen at any moment. Assistant director Joseph Reedy recalls, "There were days when strange men appeared, not crew members, not security. They quietly stood watching a scene, then nodded. Sometimes they offered advice with a short comment. A wise guy holds the cigarette like this. Jimmy would never wear that colored suit." And then they vanished. No one knew who they were. Ray Liotta still remembers one afternoon vividly. While he was practicing how Henry Hill moved his hands, an older man approached and said, "Henry never shook his right hand. He shook his left." Liotta asked how he knew. The man just smiled. "I did business with him." After that, he walked away, never to appear again. Lorraine Bracco had a similar encounter. While she was researching her role as Karen at a restaurant in Little Italy, a woman approached. No introduction of her name, just a whisper. "Karen wears jewelry like this, dresses like this. She's not an outsider. She's one of us." Only later did Bracco realize that she had just spoken with someone who had truly lived in that world. Even the Copacabana scene, the famous long take, received unexpected help. A kitchen staff member whispered to Ray Liotta, "I was here when the real Henry Hill walked in. Let me show you how he greeted everyone." And so the film didn't just recreate. It was refined by the living witnesses themselves. The chilling part is this. The FBI was also there to provide detailed consultations. They talked about procedures, about cases. But the next day, those from the other side showed up again. One day it was the law. The next, it was crime. Both sides contributed to building the film. Scorsese later admitted, "We weren't sure anymore if we were making a film about the mafia or making a film with the mafia." One of the secrets that turned Goodfellas into a masterpiece was Martin Scorsese's boldness in filmmaking. He didn't want the actors just reading lines. He wanted them to live in the scene, and so many iconic moments were born from improvisation. Remember the famous "funny how" scene? On paper, it didn't exist. Joe Pesci shared a childhood memory. When he slipped and called a gangster funny, in an instant, the air turned to suspended death. Scorsese heard the story and immediately said, "That's a scene." When filming, he didn't warn the other actors at the table. Ray Liotta recalls, "When Joe suddenly changed his expression, I really thought he was about to kill me. The smile vanished, replaced by killing intent, and everyone's confused reaction. That was real. It was no longer acting. It was primal fear, captured on film." Scorsese often used a trick. He whispered different, sometimes conflicting directions to each actor. One was told to stay calm, another to explode. The result was chaotic tension, just like the real mafia world. The improvisation extended even to the violent scenes, like the one where Tommy smashes a gun into the restaurant owner's head. At first, it was carefully staged, but Pesci asked to do it one time only, no rehearsal. The result was real shock on everyone's faces. That fear. Scorsese kept it intact in the final cut. Even Ray Liotta lived like Henry Hill during the climax phase. To portray the paranoia of being tracked by a helicopter, he deliberately stayed awake for days. No drugs, just pure sleeplessness. During filming, he truly hallucinated, and that delusion etched itself onto the screen, making the audience feel like they were falling into a nightmare themselves. Scorsese didn't just capture action. He captured mood. Every long take, every music cue, every improvised line was meant to pull the audience into Henry Hill's head, so we don't just watch. We live in that suffocating, alluring, and dangerous sensation. If we're talking about cinematic art, Goodfellas didn't just tell a story. It rewrote the language of filmmaking. Martin Scorsese and his team created techniques that became legendary, influencing cinema and television for decades afterward. The Copacabana scene, the long take over 3 minutes, is the clearest proof. The camera follows Henry and Karen from the street outside, through the kitchen, winding through hallways, then emerging at the lavish party table. Not a single cut, not a single misstep. But to achieve that moment, the entire crew struggled. It took 15 takes for one perfect scene. The Steadicam had to move like a dance. Every door, every waiter timed to the second. And the final result made the audience feel Henry's power, the world parting for him, as if no rules existed. Then there's the paranoia scene, Henry's last day. The camera glides from the kitchen to the living room, out to the car, panning up to the sky. The helicopter appears like a ghost overhead. The editing rhythm builds frantically, faster, more urgent, giving the audience a breathless feeling. Thelma Schoonmaker, the film editor, spliced hundreds of tiny shots from the boiling sauce pot, the rearview mirror, to each pill to recreate the cocaine-fueled panic. This was no longer a scene. It was a nightmare assembled into form. The music in Goodfellas was also a revolution. Before that, pop songs were just for atmosphere, but Scorsese made them part of the story. Remember the scene where Tommy assaults the club owner, with Donovan's guitar ringing out, the song's rhythm syncs with every blow, or Layla playing as the bodies are discovered one by one? The music becomes commentary, an invisible character narrating the tale. Even the freeze frames, sudden halts in the middle of action, were a unique innovation. Scorsese wanted to mimic the feeling of memories freezing in the character's mind, a moment so shocking that time stops, and the audience gets pulled into that memory too. These techniques are now basic lessons in film schools. But in 1990, they were risky experiments, and that risk is what made Goodfellas immortal. If the filmmaking techniques gave Goodfellas its soul, then the cast breathed life into it, with unrelenting transformations. Ray Liotta as Henry Hill is the clearest example. He didn't try to make Henry likable, nor turn him into a complete monster. Instead, Liotta just recounted the story. Through his eyes, his smile, the cold confidence of a man who believes he did nothing wrong. That's the dangerous allure, drawing the audience in while making them shiver. Joe Pesci, as Tommy DeVito, rewrote how a villain could exist on screen. He didn't play a typical brute. Pesci turned Tommy into pure unpredictability, a bomb that could explode at any moment. Just a glance, a word, and the whole scene shifts. And the truth is, much of the fear on the other actors' faces wasn't acting, but real worry that Pesci might erupt off script. Robert De Niro as Jimmy Conway took the opposite path. He didn't need to yell or make extra gestures. Jimmy's power came from silence. Just a glance, a fleeting smile. Enough to make anyone tremble. De Niro studied every tiny detail, from stacking money to holding a glass. He turned Jimmy into a cold, haunting silhouette. Lorraine Bracco as Karen Hill was a different voice, breaking the gangster's wife stereotype. She didn't play Karen as a helpless victim, but as a conscious accomplice. She loved the power, the danger, and chose to turn a blind eye to the violence to keep enjoying it. In the scene where Karen presses the gun to Henry's face, Bracco's eyes aren't just angry. They're passionate and confused, making the character more complex and terrifying than any dialogue. Paul Sorvino, as Paulie Cicero, used stillness to instill authority. He almost never raised his voice. A furrowed brow, a tilt of the head was enough for total submission. Sorvino practiced empty stares until he could make his eyes die. And those eyes turned Paulie into the image of invisible power, all of them, from Liotta to Pesci, De Niro, Bracco, and Sorvino. Didn't seek to be likable in the audience's eyes. They dared to be unlikable, to be frightening, to let their characters live as real criminals. And because of that, Goodfellas isn't like a performance film. It's like a living documentary, where we're seeing real people. When Goodfellas premiered in 1990, it wasn't just a box office success. It changed how Hollywood told stories. Before that, crime films usually drew clear lines, good versus evil, but Goodfellas shattered it all. It showed the allure and destruction happening at the same time. It made audiences both admire and fear, and that contradiction opened a new era. Without Goodfellas, there would be no The Sopranos. Creator David Chase admitted he learned from Scorsese how to show gangster life as both mundane and horrifying. Family meals alongside murders, love, betrayal, everyday tension, all stemmed from the formula Goodfellas shaped. Without Goodfellas, Breaking Bad would be harder to imagine too. Walter White is a new kind of Henry Hill. An ordinary man pulled into the spiral of power and crime, both dangerous and captivating, were Don Draper in Mad Men, Tony Soprano, even characters in House of Cards. All are spiritual descendants of Henry Hill, anti-heroes that intrigue us and terrify us. The influence spread to filmmaking techniques as well. After Goodfellas, long takes, multi-layered voiceovers, pop songs and violent scenes became the standard. From Tarantino to HBO's prestige TV series, all carry Scorsese's mark. And there's one thing few would expect. The real Henry Hill was swallowed by the film too. After its release, he started blurring real memories with movie scenes. He told Nicholas Pileggi that sometimes he couldn't remember which events were real and which were Ray Liotta's reenactments. When a film becomes so vivid that it's more real than life, that's when we understand the terrifying power of Goodfellas. 30 years later, the film doesn't just exist as a classic. It's still alive, still controversial, still rewatched endlessly, because Goodfellas doesn't just tell about the mafia. It tells about us, about the pull of power, the temptation of money, and the horrific price paid when falling into that spiral. When Goodfellas premiered, audiences and critics were stunned. Some called it the great American film, but there were also voices of concern. That the film was too violent, too raw, and even too enticing. The danger is that many viewers didn't see Goodfellas as a cautionary tale. They only saw the glamour. They were mesmerized by the suits, the cars, the lavish parties. They remembered the legendary rock tracks, but forgot the blood in the car trunk, the bodies left in freezer lockers. Martin Scorsese once sighed, "We wanted to show the spiritual emptiness," but many people only saw the thrill. In Hollywood, the reaction was full of contradictions too. At first, the studios were terrified, too violent, too morally vague. But when Goodfellas succeeded, those who opposed it rushed to claim credit. The film became the benchmark, taught in film schools, compared shoulder to shoulder with The Godfather. However, the most special thing is the presence of the real-life characters. Some original gangsters sat in the theater, watching actors portray themselves. After the screening, one left a note for Scorsese. "You got it right." Was that praise or a warning? No one dared to be sure. And then there's a strange truth. Henry Hill himself, the central figure after the film's fame, repeatedly broke witness protection rules. He went everywhere, declaring himself the guy from the movie. He picked up the phone to call Ray Liotta, critiquing his performance, even mixing real memories with cinematic ones. In the end, the government removed him from the program because he couldn't stop living in Goodfellas' shadow. That's the clearest proof. The film didn't just recreate a story. It became part of reality. It made real criminals recognize themselves in every frame. It made the public both admire and fear. And it made Hollywood never look at the crime genre the old way again. Goodfellas isn't just a film about the mafia. It's proof that art can touch truth, even when that truth is dangerous and uncomfortable. Martin Scorsese and the cast walked a thin wire, where one small mistake could lead to failure, even real peril. The result of that daring is an immortal work, a film that mesmerizes us and makes us tremble, a film that, after more than 30 years, still holds its value, still challenges how we see the world, and most importantly, challenges how we see ourselves. Because Goodfellas doesn't just tell about gangsters, it tells about temptation, about power, about the slide when people believe consequences will never catch up. It's a mirror reflecting the weakness and ambition in each of us. And perhaps that's why Goodfellas endures. Because it's not just Henry Hill's story, it's the story of humanity in any era. If you enjoyed this journey of discovery, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. We'll continue bringing you untold secrets about the classic films that shaped American culture. Which scene in Goodfellas haunts you the most? And do these behind-the-scenes revelations change how you view the film? Share in the comments below. Thank you for watching. And remember, In cinema, as in life, the truth is sometimes scarier than any fiction.